Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah, Leadership in War, Peace and Rebirth. Part 1. Roots of Leadership. The Early Life and Education of Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah, 1926-1948. Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, born on May 29, 1926 in Kuwait City, emerged into a world where the Arabian Gulf was undergoing profound changes. At the time of his birth, Kuwait was still a British protectorate and a relatively small traditional society largely dependent on maritime trade, pearl diving, and a tightly knit tribal structure. Yet within this seemingly modest setting, seeds of transformation were already being planted, and the young Jaber would grow up to become one of the key architects of Kuwait's transition into a modern, independent state. His upbringing, firmly rooted in both the Islamic and cultural traditions of his people and the administrative legacy of his royal lineage, would shape a life dedicated to the service of Kuwait. Sheikh Jaber was the third son of Sheikh Ahmad Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, the 10th ruler of Kuwait, who reigned from 1921 to 1950. His mother was Sheikha Bibi Al-Salam Al-Sabah, the daughter of Sheikh Salam Al-Mubarak Al-Sabah, the 9th ruler of Kuwait. This dual connection to the royal family through both paternal and maternal lines reinforced Sheikh Jaber's position within the ruling establishment from birth. From an early age, he was steeped in the customs, values, and responsibilities expected of a future leader. His lineage was not merely symbolic, it was the very foundation of the principled and balanced approach to leadership that he would develop throughout his life. Sheikh Ahmad, Jaber's father, was known for his firm yet moderate approach to rule. He was devoutly Islamic but not rigid, and he balanced religious observance with a keen interest in administrative development and modern education. These values left a deep impression on the young Jaber, who was raised in an environment that valued faith, discipline, and service. Unlike the rigid or isolated upbringing that sometimes characterized royalty in other parts of the world, Sheikh Jaber's childhood was marked by a healthy blend of structure and openness. His father's inclusive approach gave Jaber access not only to religious and cultural traditions, but also to the early winds of modernization that were beginning to stir in the Gulf. As a child, Sheikh Jaber displayed an exceptional curiosity, humility, and a calm, observant nature. These traits were noticed by his family and tutors, who regarded him as a thoughtful and contemplative youth, more interested in understanding the world than in the privileges of his station. His education began at the Al-Mubarakia School, one of the first modern educational institutions established in Kuwait in 1911. The school was seen as a beacon of enlightenment, offering instruction in subjects such as arithmetic, Arabic grammar, religious studies, and history. Sheikh Jaber thrived in this environment, where he was introduced not only to classical learning, but also to the rudiments of civic responsibility. After progressing at Al-Mubarakia, he moved on to Al-Ahmadiyya School and subsequently the Sharqiya School. These schools were instrumental in shaping his academic character and introducing him to broader intellectual pursuits. They emphasized Islamic ethics, the Arabic language, and the study of Kuwait's political structure and heritage. Recognizing his growing academic potential and his seriousness toward learning, Sheikh Ahmad arranged for his son to receive private tutoring in religious studies, the Arabic language and its classical literature, and English. A rare and valuable asset at the time, reflecting Kuwait's increasing interaction with Western institutions. This dual exposure to Islamic jurisprudence and Western thought made Sheikh Jaber part of a generation of Kuwaiti leaders who could straddle both tradition and modernity with ease. He was not confined to classrooms alone. Sheikh Ahmad believed that true education also came through experience, and so he arranged for his son to travel abroad. These formative journeys allowed Jaber to witness firsthand the political, economic, and social conditions in other parts of the Arab world, as well as in Europe and Asia. These international experiences left a lasting impression on the young prince. He observed how other countries governed themselves, how they interacted with their citizens, and how they managed economic resources, especially in post-colonial or rapidly developing societies. These early travels broadened his perspective and helped him appreciate the importance of diplomacy, international cooperation, and strategic planning. He came to understand that Kuwait's future would depend not only on internal reforms and leadership, but also on how skillfully it positioned itself on the world stage. Thus, by the time he returned home, Sheikh Jaber was already envisioning a Kuwait that could blend its rich traditions with the demands of modern governance and global diplomacy. In these years, he also came into close contact with prominent figures in Kuwait's political evolution, especially Sheikh Abdullah Al-Sabah and Sheikh Saad Al-Sabah. Their progressive ideas and administrative innovations would later serve as both models and partners in Jaber's own political career. Through these relationships, Jaber developed not only a firm understanding of policymaking and statecraft, but also a growing passion for public service and economic development. By the late 1940s, Sheikh Jaber had emerged as a mature, educated, and thoughtful young man, well prepared to assume responsibilities in public administration. His early years, marked by solid education, international exposure, spiritual discipline, and a deep awareness of his country's potential, would lay the foundation for his eventual rise to the highest office in Kuwait. But before that day would come, he would begin his career in one of Kuwait's most dynamic and strategic regions, where the country's newfound oil wealth was just beginning to shape its destiny. Part 2. Early administrative career in Al-Ahmadi, 1949-1958. As Kuwait emerged from the shadows of the Second World War, a new era of economic opportunity and modernization began to unfold, largely driven by the discovery and development of oil. Against this backdrop of transformation, Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah began his formal entry into public service. In 1949, at just 23 years of age, he was appointed by his father, Sheikh Ahmad Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, to serve as his deputy in the oil-rich city of Al-Ahmadi, marking the beginning of a long and illustrious career in governance. Al-Ahmadi, located in the southern part of Kuwait, was rapidly becoming the economic nerve center of the country. Named after Sheikh Ahmad himself, the city was established to house the burgeoning operations of the Kuwait Oil Company, KOC, which had begun exporting oil in 1946. As oil revenues began to flow into the state coffers, Al-Ahmadi quickly transformed from a modest township into a strategic industrial hub, home to oil fields, refineries, pipelines, and a growing expatriate workforce. It was a city unlike any other in Kuwait at the time, and its governance required a sophisticated balance of security, administration, and diplomacy. In his role as deputy ruler and general supervisor of Al-Ahmadi, Sheikh Jaber was tasked with responsibilities that would test and refine his abilities in leadership, planning, and crisis management. Despite his youth, he approached the position with remarkable maturity and focus. His first and most pressing duty was the preservation of law and order in a city that was fast becoming an epicenter of foreign activity and economic experimentation. With oil workers, engineers, contractors, and business people arriving from around the world, the task of maintaining security while fostering cooperation became one of his top priorities. Sheikh Jaber demonstrated a calm, composed approach to governance, emphasizing mutual respect and coordination with foreign partners while asserting Kuwait's sovereignty and cultural values. His ability to diplomatically engage with executives from the Kuwait Oil Company, many of whom were British and American, set a precedent for respectful and effective international collaboration that would later define Kuwait's foreign policy. Beyond security and diplomacy, Sheikh Jaber took an active role in the planning and development of Al-Ahmadi's urban infrastructure. He supervised housing allocations for workers, initiated zoning plans, and ensured that the city's architecture adhered to both functionality and cultural sensibilities. He understood that Al-Ahmadi could serve as a model for Kuwait's future urban expansion, a blend of modern technology and Kuwaiti identity. His attention to detail and insistence on quality led to the development of well-organized residential zones, roads, and public facilities, which became a benchmark for later projects across the country. It was during these years that Sheikh Jaber's interest in economic planning began to crystallize. He came to recognize oil not merely as a commodity, but as the cornerstone of Kuwait's future. He closely observed how revenues were being generated, how they were spent, and how they could be reinvested in education, health, and infrastructure. These insights laid the groundwork for his future fiscal policies as Minister of Finance and eventually as Emir. Al-Ahmadi became his classroom, and he was a diligent student of its economic, social, and political lessons. His tenure in Al-Ahmadi also exposed him to the complexities of balancing traditional authority with the demands of modernization. He had to make difficult decisions regarding land ownership, compensation, and displacement in order to make room for oil infrastructure. Rather than impose these changes unilaterally, he frequently met with tribal leaders, residents, and company officials to ensure that any decisions were reached through consultation and consensus. This early practice of inclusive governance became a hallmark of his political style. At the same time, Sheikh Jaber was mindful of the cultural and religious dimensions of Kuwaiti society. He supported the establishment of mosques, schools, and community centers in Al-Ahmadi, ensuring that the rapidly modernizing city did not lose its spiritual and moral compass. He also emphasized the importance of public services and welfare, overseeing the creation of basic health clinics and water distribution systems that significantly improved the quality of life for residents. Through these efforts, Sheikh Jaber gained not only the confidence of the ruling family and his peers, but also the trust and admiration of the people. His work in Al-Ahmadi over nearly a decade revealed his pragmatic leadership style, firm but fair, progressive yet rooted in tradition. He emerged from this experience with a well-rounded perspective on administration, economy, urban development, and international cooperation. By the end of the 1950s, Kuwait was preparing for an even greater leap, political independence. And as the nation stood on the threshold of this historic transformation, Sheikh Jaber would be called upon to play a leading role in shaping the financial and economic architecture of the soon-to-be sovereign state. Part 3. Architect of Kuwait's Financial Sovereignty. From currency reform to economic nation-building, to 1959-1963. The dawn of the 1960s ushered in an era of transformation for the state of Kuwait. As the country stood on the cusp of political independence and economic rebirth, few individuals were as central to its emerging national identity as Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah. By the late 1950s, Sheikh Jaber had already distinguished himself through a decade of leadership in Al-Ahmadi, where he had gained extensive experience in managing one of Kuwait's most dynamic oil centers. Recognizing his administrative success, integrity, and vision, Sheikh Abdullah Al-Sabah, the progressive and forward-looking ruler of Kuwait, appointed him in 1959 to head the Department of Finance and Public Property. This marked the beginning of one of the most consequential phases of Sheikh Jaber's early political life. This appointment was more than just an administrative reassignment. It was an expression of confidence in a young but highly capable leader to chart the economic future of Kuwait in a time of historic change. Sheikh Jaber was not merely managing accounts. He was laying the fiscal foundations of a modern state. Entrusted with the nation's wealth, assets, and financial institutions, he assumed responsibility for allocating revenues, overseeing government expenditures, managing public property, and preparing for a long-term economic vision at a time when Kuwait's economy was becoming inextricably linked to its oil exports. Sheikh Jaber approached his responsibilities with both caution and ambition. One of his first tasks was to modernize and institutionalize Kuwait's financial system. He began implementing structured budgeting processes and sought to establish checks and balances that would ensure transparency and reduce mismanagement of the vast oil revenues that were now pouring into government coffers. He recruited skilled economists and advisors and formed a new generation of technocrats, many of whom would go on to hold major roles in Kuwait's financial future. Perhaps the most symbolic and historically significant achievement during this period was Sheikh Jaber's leadership in establishing the Kuwaiti Currency Board and introducing the Kuwaiti dinar as the official national currency. Prior to this, Kuwait, like many Gulf states, used the Indian rupee as its medium of exchange. While functional, the rupee was a colonial vestige and a source of monetary dependency. For Sheikh Jaber, The issuance of a national currency was not just a technical matter, it was an act of sovereignty, a declaration that Kuwait was ready to stand on its own feet financially and politically. Under his supervision, the Currency Board undertook an intensive study of international monetary systems, collaborated with experts on currency design, and prepared for the logistical challenge of replacing all existing money in circulation. On April 1, 1961, the first Kuwaiti dinar was officially released. The design of the currency reflected both tradition and progress. It included images of Sheikh Abdullah Al-Sabah, architectural and cultural landmarks of Kuwait, and security features comparable to those used in advanced economies. Each note bore the signature of Sheikh Jaber, then head of the board, symbolizing his personal guardianship over the nation's fiscal honor. The successful introduction of the dinar provided a massive boost to Kuwait's economy. It allowed the government to control inflation, manage imports and exports more effectively, and solidify financial independence from foreign monetary institutions. The dinar quickly became one of the strongest and most stable currencies in the region, a legacy that continues to this day. Sheikh Jaber's role in this pivotal transition earned him wide acclaim and positioned him as the intellectual and practical architect of Kuwait's economic sovereignty. Yet currency reform was only the beginning of Sheikh Jaber's vast economic agenda. He was also entrusted with leading the Office of Oil Affairs and Public Housing, portfolios that required not only financial expertise, but political tact and social vision. In the oil sector, he began compiling data and building frameworks for regulating Kuwait's natural resources. He insisted on comprehensive record-keeping, fair pricing agreements with foreign companies, and reinvestment of profits into national development. In the realm of housing and property, Sheikh Jaber initiated large-scale efforts to appraise and value residential and commercial properties across Kuwait City. Urban development had become urgent as Kuwait's population swelled and as traditional mud brick buildings gave way to modern structures. Yet Sheikh Jaber ensured that this transformation did not come at the expense of ordinary citizens. He personally oversaw land and home valuation policies to ensure that those displaced by redevelopment projects received generous compensation. He insisted on setting the highest possible values for properties so that Kuwaiti families would not only avoid hardship, but in fact benefit from the country's economic windfall. This commitment to equitable distribution of wealth would remain a hallmark of his public philosophy throughout his life. By the early 1960s, Sheikh Jaber had already transformed the Ministry of Finance into one of the most professional, respected, and capable institutions in the Arab world. His meticulous planning, ethical leadership, and unwavering sense of duty set an example for others in government service. His insistence on fairness, transparency, and long-term sustainability helped build public trust in the ruling family and laid the foundations for a social contract between the government and its people, one that rested on service, stewardship, and shared prosperity. Then in 1961, Kuwait took the decisive step of declaring independence from the United Kingdom. On June 19th of that year, the Treaty of Protection with Britain was terminated, and Kuwait emerged as a fully sovereign state under the leadership of Sheikh Abdullah Al-Sabah. The move was met with both national celebration and regional tension. Iraq, under the leadership of General Abd al-Karim Qasim, laid claim to Kuwait, sparking a political crisis. Sheikh Jaber was selected to lead a diplomatic mission to several Arab capitals in order to gain recognition and support for Kuwait's independence and to explain its position on the international stage. The mission, composed of distinguished Kuwaiti statesmen such as Abdulaziz Hamad al-Sakar, Youssef Ibrahim al-Ghanem, and Abdulaziz al-Sarawi, among others, visited countries including Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Sudan, Lebanon, Tunisia, Morocco, and Libya. It was a resounding success. Kuwait was soon admitted into the Arab League and later that same year became a full member of the United Nations. This diplomatic triumph, carried out with tact and humility, was largely credited to the team's efforts, especially the leadership and persuasion of Sheikh Jaber, whose calm and articulate presence left a strong impression on foreign dignitaries. With independence achieved, a constituent assembly was formed to draft a new constitution, and the first national government of Kuwait was assembled. In this government, Sheikh Jaber was appointed Minister of Finance and Industry, a dual portfolio that gave him sweeping authority over Kuwait's economy. It was a testament to his achievements over the past years and a sign of the trust placed in him by both the Emir and the public. During this time, Sheikh Jaber also began to develop a more expansive vision for Kuwait's regional and global role. He explored options for using Kuwait's wealth to assist other developing nations, laying the groundwork for what would later become the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development, one of the most influential foreign aid institutions in the region. Thus, between 1959 and 1963, Sheikh Jaber evolved from a capable administrator to a masterful statesman and economic strategist. His tenure as finance minister solidified his legacy as the father of Kuwait's modern financial institutions and a visionary leader who saw economic strength not as an end in itself, but as a means to national dignity, equity, and enduring development. Part 4, The Statesman Ascends, From Finance Minister to Crown Prince, 1963-1967. As the 1960s progressed, the newly independent state of Kuwait was rapidly evolving from a modest oil-producing protectorate into a sovereign and dynamic state on the world stage. Central to this transformation was Sheikh Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah, who, after his distinguished work as Minister of Finance and Industry, continued to climb the political ranks, now entrusted with some of the nation's most sensitive and complex responsibilities. Between 1963 and 1967, Sheikh Jaber would consolidate his reputation not only as the architect of Kuwait's financial independence, but also as one of the kingdom's most capable statesmen, a man prepared to one day assume the full responsibilities of leadership. Following the success of Kuwait's admission to the United Nations and the adoption of its first constitution, a new political era was inaugurated. In 1963, Kuwait held its first parliamentary elections for the National Assembly under the 1962 Constitution, and a new government was formed. In this government, Sheikh Jaber retained his position as Minister of Finance and Industry, but was also named Deputy Prime Minister, a key role that brought him directly into the highest echelon of decision-making alongside the then Prime Minister, Sheikh Saad Al-Sabah. As Deputy Prime Minister, Sheikh Jaber became deeply involved in a wide range of internal and external affairs. Domestically, he continued to oversee the country's financial policies while also shaping legislation regarding trade, economic development, and public services. He played a pivotal role in coordinating between ministries, ensuring that policies were aligned with the National Development Plan and the principles laid out in the Constitution. His previous decade of administrative experience allowed him to navigate the increasingly complex relationship between the executive branch and the elected National Assembly with confidence and skill. One of Sheikh Jaber's major achievements during this period was his continued work in expanding Kuwait's economic infrastructure. He oversaw the establishment of new institutions, such as the Kuwait National Petroleum Company, and spearheaded initiatives to diversify the economy beyond oil. Under his direction, government subsidies were introduced to encourage agricultural and industrial development, as well as to provide affordable housing to Kuwaiti families. The goal was not merely to provide material comfort, but to lay the groundwork for a stable and self-reliant society rooted in both modern opportunity and traditional values. Another hallmark of his tenure as Deputy Prime Minister was his role in the founding and operation of Kuwait's welfare state. He advocated for systems that offered pensions for the elderly, healthcare for all citizens, and generous educational scholarships for students wishing to study abroad. This commitment to the people's well-being, fueled by the belief that oil wealth should benefit every Kuwaiti, further endeared him to the public. Sheikh Jaber's ability to manage vast sums of public funds while maintaining rigorous accountability and public transparency gave him immense credibility at home and abroad. His deft handling of national finances was not unnoticed internationally. Foreign governments and financial institutions began to take note of Kuwait's fiscal discipline and generous but prudent foreign aid programs. Sheikh Jaber became a respected figure at global economic forums and meetings, where he represented Kuwait with a quiet dignity and intellectual seriousness that made him stand out among regional leaders. In the mid-1960s, Kuwait was still in the process of defining the roles and succession of its leadership under its newly established constitutional monarchy. Following the death of Emir Abdullah Al-Sabah in 1965, Sheikh Saad Al-Sabah, who had served as prime minister, ascended the throne as the new emir. Recognizing Sheikh Jaber's extraordinary capabilities, Emir Sabah made a momentous decision. On November 30th, 1965, he appointed Sheikh Jaber as Prime Minister of Kuwait, giving him full responsibility for managing the affairs of the executive branch. But the elevation did not stop there. In a decisive move that would shape the future of Kuwait's monarchy, on May 31st, 1966, Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah was formally nominated and confirmed as the Crown Prince of Kuwait by a vote of the National Assembly, following the Emir's endorsement. This dual role, serving as both Crown Prince and Prime Minister, was a testament to the trust placed in him by both the ruling family and the legislative body, and it made Sheikh Jaber the de facto leader of domestic governance and day-to-day policy. To commemorate this significant moment in Kuwaiti history, 3 postage stamps were issued on December 11, 1966, celebrating the allegiance to Sheikh Jaber as Crown Prince. These stamps bore his portrait and symbolized not only his rise to power, but the modern face of Kuwaiti leadership, a blend of tradition, competence, and popular legitimacy. As Crown Prince, Sheikh Jaber was gradually prepared by Emir Sabah to assume the full responsibilities of rulership. The Emir entrusted him with managing internal affairs, chairing cabinet meetings, overseeing government formation, and guiding national development plans. Sheikh Jaber approached these duties with diligence, humility, and an unrelenting sense of duty. Though he now stood only one step away from the emirate, he remained grounded, frequently visiting schools, hospitals, industrial sites, and remote villages to understand the real conditions of his people. One of the most serious tests of leadership came in June 1967, with the outbreak of the Six-Day War between Israel and several Arab states. In the immediate aftermath, as regional instability surged and tensions escalated, the government of Kuwait declared martial law. On June 5, 1967, Sheikh Jaber, by then Crown Prince and Prime Minister, was appointed martial law governor, assuming extraordinary powers to ensure internal security, protect national interests, and manage emergency governance. Though martial law is typically associated with repression, Sheikh Jaber managed it with balance and restraint. The emergency laws were enforced with minimal disruption to daily life, and by January 3, 1968, martial law was lifted. In the months that followed, Kuwait resumed its political normalcy, a fact largely credited to Sheikh Jaber's careful and even-handed management during the crisis. Between 1963 and 1967, Sheikh Jaber's transformation from financial minister to crown prince and national steward was complete. He had matured into a national figure trusted by the royal family, the parliament, the civil service, and the Kuwaiti people. His steady hand, principled leadership, and vision for Kuwait's economic and social advancement had made him more than a statesman. He had become the hope of a generation. But even greater challenges and greater tests of leadership were on the horizon. Part 5, Architect of Stability, Political Leadership, Reform, and Crisis Management, 1967-1977. Following his formal appointment as both Crown Prince and Prime Minister, Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah assumed an increasingly central role in the day-to-day governance of Kuwait. This period, which spanned from the late 1960s through most of the 1970s, was marked by a blend of developmental ambition and regional instability. Under his stewardship, Kuwait saw progress in industrial development, welfare expansion, and social reform, even as it faced political challenges from within and mounting turbulence from without. Sheikh Jaber, in his dual role, emerged as a guardian of institutional continuity, managing government formation, overseeing national policies, and standing at the helm of Kuwait's executive authority. After the lifting of martial law in early 1968, Sheikh Jaber resumed the task of overseeing Kuwait's national reconstruction and modernization. On February 2, 1971, he formed Kuwait's 7th cabinet, refining ministerial responsibilities to better match the country's developmental goals. With Kuwait's oil wealth continuing to rise, Sheikh Jaber expanded public spending in key sectors such as education, healthcare, infrastructure, and urban planning. Yet, he remained vigilant in fiscal management, ensuring that the rising revenues were matched with institutional growth and future-oriented planning. In the area of public works and infrastructure, Sheikh Jaber's government initiated and expanded several landmark projects. He was a staunch advocate of technological advancement and modernization, overseeing the establishment of Shuaik Port, the launching of Kuwait's first seawater distillation plants, and the creation of experimental agricultural programs aimed at increasing domestic food production in an otherwise arid environment. These projects were not only vital to Kuwait's development, but also symbolic of the nation's emerging self-reliance. Oil remained the cornerstone of the economy, and Sheikh Jaber's government focused on strengthening Kuwait's control over its own natural resources. Under his guidance, Kuwait gradually took fuller ownership of its petroleum industry, asserting more direct influence over extraction, refining, and exportation. In tandem, Sheikh Jaber supported the founding of the Kuwait National Petroleum Company, KNPC, a state-owned entity that symbolized Kuwait's transition from oil dependency to oil stewardship. As Kuwait's domestic profile strengthened, Sheikh Jaber remained keenly aware of the geopolitical tremors shaking the region. The aftermath of the 1967 Arab-Israeli War had left Arab nationalism wounded and the balance of power in flux. Kuwait, as a small yet wealthy and independent Arab state, was under pressure to navigate competing loyalties between pan-Arab solidarity, regional stability, and its own national interests. Sheikh Jaber's steady diplomatic hand helped Kuwait maintain its autonomy while extending cautious support to Arab causes through financial aid and humanitarian assistance, avoiding entanglement in direct conflict. Throughout the 1970s, Sheikh Jaber continued to serve as prime minister, forming and reshaping cabinets as needed to adapt to evolving national priorities. He formed Kuwait's 8th government on February 9, 1975, and 9th government on September 6, 1976, each time incorporating experienced ministers and rising technocrats into government service. These reshuffles reflected Sheikh Jaber's preference for meritocratic governance over rigid political hierarchies, and he was praised for promoting competence and integrity above personal loyalty. However, this period was not without internal political strain. The 1975 National Assembly, elected amid calls for reform and expanded democratic participation, began pressing for greater oversight of government policies, particularly on issues related to oil revenue management, civil liberties, and freedom of the press. Tensions escalated between the legislative and executive branches, culminating in a constitutional crisis in 1976, when the Emir, at the urging of senior advisors including Sheikh Jaber, dissolved the National Assembly and suspended several articles of the Constitution. While this move was deeply controversial and drew criticism from various segments of society, it was seen by the ruling family as necessary to preserve national unity and institutional integrity. During this politically sensitive time, Sheikh Jaber took a cautious and conciliatory approach. Though he had recommended strong action to the Emir, he remained open to dialogue and national reconciliation. He focused on maintaining calm, overseeing the continued delivery of public services, and preparing for a future reactivation of constitutional life. The events of 1976 to 77 marked Sheikh Jaber as a realist, one who recognized the need for reform, but who also believed in preserving stability in the face of internal confrontation. Another challenge that shaped this era was Kuwait's increasingly vocal civil society. Professional associations, labor unions, and intellectual movements were on the rise. Sheikh Jaber understood that political liberalization would eventually have to be addressed, but was also concerned about the pace and direction of such movements. His response was to quietly support educational initiatives, cultural centers, and youth programs that would empower citizens while maintaining national cohesion. By the mid-1970s, Sheikh Jaber had also taken important steps to expand Kuwait's international aid and investment profile. Under his direction, Kuwait began offering significant financial assistance to countries in Africa, Asia, and the Arab world. These efforts helped raise Kuwait's international standing and cemented its reputation as a generous and responsible member of the global community. Sheikh Jaber believed that Kuwait, as a small but wealthy nation, had a moral duty to support global development and peace. This conviction would later be formalized in Kuwait's foreign aid policy and institutions, many of which trace their origins to his time as prime minister. Despite the political turbulence of the time, Sheikh Jaber maintained his personal popularity among Kuwaitis. His quiet demeanor, dedication to public service, and reputation for honesty earned him the affectionate nickname, the Prince of the People. Unlike many rulers of the oil era, he was never ostentatious in his lifestyle and avoided grandstanding. He was often seen at hospitals, development sites, and cultural events, engaging directly with the public and offering words of encouragement and reassurance. Then on December 31st, 1977, a defining moment arrived. Emir Sabah Al-Sabah passed away, ending a reign marked by institutional innovation and political turbulence. As the designated heir, Sheikh Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah was formally sworn in as the Emir of Kuwait, beginning a new chapter in the country's history. Though he had effectively ruled as prime minister for over a decade, now the full weight of leadership rested upon his shoulders. The transition was smooth and widely accepted, a testament to the trust and respect Sheikh Jaber had earned. Yet as he took the constitutional oath and assumed the title of Emir, few could have predicted the scale of the trials that would soon confront him, from assassination attempts to foreign invasions, and the resilience with which he would face them. Part 6. The Visionary Emir, Ascension to Power and the Birth of Gulf Unity, 1997-1985. When Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah was sworn in as the 13th ruler of Kuwait on December 31st, 1977, following the death of his cousin Emir Sabah Al-Sabah, it marked the beginning of an era defined by both visionary leadership and regional volatility. Though Sheikh Jaber had already accumulated nearly 3 decades of experience in governance, as finance minister, prime minister, and crown prince, the assumption of the emirate brought with it a new level of responsibility. He was now the sovereign head of state, guardian of the constitution, and the highest authority in Kuwait. From the moment he took the oath of office, Sheikh Jaber set about leading the country with steady hands, moderate wisdom, and a deep commitment to institutional continuity and regional cooperation. His first act as emir was one that would shape the country's political leadership for decades. On January 31st, 1978, Sheikh Jaber issued a decree nominating Sheikh Saad Al-Abdullah Al-Sabah, his trusted cousin and longtime ally, to serve as crown prince. It was a strategic and unifying choice. While several senior members of the Al-Sabah family were initially considered for the position, including Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmad and Sheikh Jaber Al-Ali, Sheikh Jaber's nomination of Sheikh Saad received near-unanimous support from the ruling family and was promptly endorsed by the Council of Ministers. On February 18, 1978, the National Assembly ratified the appointment, officially recognizing Sheikh Saad as the heir apparent. At the same time, Sheikh Jaber appointed Sheikh Saad as prime minister, entrusting him with executive responsibilities while he himself oversaw national policy and royal duties. The arrangement reflected Sheikh Jaber's leadership style, delegation of authority combined with direct oversight. By dividing responsibilities between head of state and head of government, he ensured continuity, efficiency, and a clear chain of command. Sheikh Saad remained in that role for 25 years until health concerns prompted his resignation in 2003. To commemorate this peaceful transition and to celebrate Kuwait's renewed political stability, the government issued 8 commemorative postage stamps on June 28, 1978, featuring the image of Sheikh Jaber and symbols of Kuwaiti heritage. These stamps, widely circulated across the Gulf and beyond, were both a cultural milestone and a reflection of the public's pride in their new emir. Beyond his appointments and symbolic gestures, Sheikh Jaber quickly set to work implementing his long-term vision for Kuwait. Having spent most of his political life managing finances, he now sought to translate economic prosperity into sustainable national development. His priorities included social welfare, scientific advancement, infrastructure expansion, and political inclusion. Yet, what distinguished Sheikh Jaber's reign from the outset was his deep awareness of regional dynamics, particularly in the wake of Britain's military withdrawal from the Gulf in 1971. The late 1970s were a time of rising uncertainty in the Middle East. The Iranian Revolution in 1979, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, and ongoing tensions between Iraq and Iran posed growing threats to the smaller Gulf monarchies. Sheikh Jaber, with his characteristic foresight, recognized the necessity of regional cooperation and unity in the face of these geopolitical pressures. It was Sheikh Jaber who first conceptualized and actively advocated for the formation of a formal alliance among the Gulf Arab states. In May 1976, he traveled to the United Arab Emirates to consult with Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, the UAE's president, about the feasibility of such a project. Sheikh Jaber envisioned a multilateral platform for the Gulf countries to coordinate policies on defense, trade, energy, and foreign affairs. He believed the vacuum left by Britain's departure needed to be filled by a united regional front to preserve sovereignty and peace. The following years were spent building diplomatic consensus among Gulf neighbors. In November 1980, at an Arab League summit in Amman, Jordan's Sheikh Jaber formally proposed the creation of a Gulf Council. His proposal gained significant traction, particularly as the Iran-Iraq War, which erupted in 1980, threatened to destabilize the Gulf region. Sheikh Jaber's diplomatic strategy was built on mutual security, cultural commonality, and shared economic interests. He assured his counterparts that such a union would not serve foreign powers, but would instead reinforce Gulf autonomy. This effort bore fruit in May 1981, when the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, was formally established in Abu Dhabi, comprising Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, and Oman. Sheikh Jaber is widely credited as the intellectual father of the GCC, having provided both the vision and the diplomatic groundwork for its formation. The council was created not merely as a response to external threats, but also as a long-term framework for economic integration, collective security, and cultural exchange among Gulf states. Sheikh Jaber did not stop there. In 1996, during the GCC's 17th summit in Doha, he proposed the establishment of a Gulf Consultative Council, a parliamentary-style body with 30 members, 5 from each country, designed to encourage regional political dialogue. Although this advisory body held limited power, it symbolized Sheikh Jaber's desire to see the Gulf monarchies evolve into more participatory and cooperative systems. Back home, Sheikh Jaber continued to invest in scientific and cultural development. In 1979, he inaugurated a natural gas project in the Ahmadi region, a milestone in Kuwait's strategy to diversify its energy sector. That same year, he ordered the establishment of a national observatory, which became the Al-Ojari Astronomical Observatory, completed in 1986 and named in honor of the prominent Kuwaiti astronomer Saleh Al-Ojari. These initiatives reflected the Emir's belief in the value of scientific exploration and environmental awareness. In the realm of politics, Sheikh Jaber took a decisive yet measured step by restoring parliamentary life in 1981. After the 1976 constitutional suspension, this move marked a return to democratic processes. However, he also introduced a redistricting law, increasing electoral constituencies from 10 to 25, a change that would have significant implications for political participation and representation. The 1981 National Assembly was elected under these new terms and functioned until 1985, when new tensions again led to parliamentary dissolution. Yet despite political turbulence and intermittent unrest, Sheikh Jaber maintained a steady course. His blend of pragmatism, patience, and principled governance enabled Kuwait to remain among the most stable and progressive states in the region. His diplomatic efforts had elevated Kuwait's profile in global affairs, and his internal reforms laid the groundwork for long-term development. But stability would soon be tested. On May 25, 1985, an event occurred that would leave a permanent scar on his life and elevate his stature as a leader who remained unshaken in the face of death. Part 7. Resilience amidst danger. Surviving assassination and steering through political upheaval. Year 1985-1990. The mid-1980s marked a dramatic turning point in the life and leadership of Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah. Though he had successfully guided Kuwait through years of prosperity, institution building, and regional diplomacy, he now faced the gravest challenge to his personal safety, and by extension, the sovereignty and stability of the nation itself. On May 25, 1985, Sheikh Jaber survived a targeted assassination attempt that shocked Kuwait and reverberated across the Arab world. It was not only a test of his physical endurance, but also a critical moment that reinforced his image as a leader of exceptional courage, restraint, and devotion to his people. That day began like any other, with the Emir traveling in a convoy to his office at Saif Palace, the administrative heart of the Kuwaiti government. However, as his motorcade passed through the busy streets of Kuwait City, a car bomb exploded with devastating force, aimed precisely at his vehicle. The explosion killed 2 of his bodyguards and left several others injured. The Emir himself miraculously escaped unharmed, shielded by his armored car, but the psychological impact on the nation was profound. This was no random act of violence. It was a deliberate attempt to destabilize the Kuwaiti state by eliminating its symbolic and operational head. In the wake of the attack, investigations quickly pointed to elements aligned with pro-Iranian factions, specifically the Iraqi branch of the Islamic Dawah Party, which had been active in both Iraq and Kuwait. The main suspect, Jamal Jafar Ali al-Ibrahimi, later known as Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, was identified as the mastermind behind the plot. Though he escaped justice at the time, the incident revealed the extent to which regional conflicts, especially the Iran-Iraq War, were spilling over into Kuwait's internal affairs. Kuwait's open political space, independent stance, and support for Iraq during the war had made it a target for retaliation by Iranian-backed elements. Rather than responding with panic or repression, Sheikh Jaber reacted with calm dignity. In a public speech following the attempt on his life, he famously stated, "The life of Jaber al-Ahmad, however long it may be, is the life of a man. It may be long or short, but what truly matters, what must last, is the life of Kuwait. The most important thing is that Kuwait survives, and the greatest thing is the safety of Kuwait." These words resonated deeply with Kuwaitis. The Emir's humility, steadfastness, and refusal to be intimidated became a rallying point for national unity. Security was reinforced across the country, but there was no large-scale crackdown. Instead, Sheikh Jaber directed his government to stay the course, ensuring the continuity of development programs, public services, and political stability. The incident underscored his strength as a leader who could absorb shocks without compromising his nation's democratic and institutional identity. Yet the political challenges did not end there. In the July 1986, tensions between the government and the National Assembly escalated, particularly over issues such as press freedoms, public accountability, and political reforms. Sheikh Jaber, concerned about increasing polarization and paralysis in governance, dissolved the National Assembly. A partial suspension of constitutional articles followed, a controversial but, in his view, necessary step to maintain stability and protect national interests. This decision was met with significant opposition from former MPs, civil society leaders, and intellectuals who had grown accustomed to Kuwait's relatively open political climate. In response, a grassroots movement known as Diwaniyat al-Ithnain, Monday gatherings, emerged in 1989 and 1990, consisting of informal political salons held in private homes. These gatherings, attended by as many as 26 former parliamentarians, became forums for peaceful protest, demanding the restoration of parliamentary life and the full reinstatement of the Constitution of 1962. Sheikh Jaber, while firm in maintaining order, refrained from heavy-handed repression. Instead, he instructed his advisors to monitor the situation closely and to engage in behind-the-scenes dialogue with the movement's leaders. His response culminated in a call for national dialogue and the establishment of a national council, intended to serve as a temporary advisory body until political stability was restored. Though the council was boycotted by many opposition figures, it reflected Sheikh Jaber's characteristic approach: moderate reform through careful consensus rather than sudden confrontation. Meanwhile, the broader regional landscape was deteriorating. The Iran-Iraq War, which had raged from 1980 to 1988, had left Kuwait economically strained and geopolitically vulnerable. Kuwait had extended billions of dollars in loans to Iraq and allowed Iraqi use of Kuwaiti ports and logistics. The end of the war, however, did not bring gratitude. It brought resentment. Saddam Hussein, leader of Iraq, began accusing Kuwait of overproducing oil and stealing oil from the Rumaila oil field near the border. He also demanded that Kuwait cancel the war debts Iraq had accumulated. The situation escalated quickly, with rhetoric turning to threats and economic complaints turning into territorial claims. Throughout this period, Sheikh Jaber remained committed to diplomacy. He sought mediation through the Arab League, sent emissaries to Baghdad, and engaged the Gulf Cooperation Council (GCC) in seeking a peaceful resolution. But beneath these efforts, he also recognized the need for defense preparedness and began reinforcing Kuwait's military capabilities and international alliances. Despite these steps, the looming threat was underestimated by many in the region and internationally. Kuwait's international standing remained strong during this time. Sheikh Jaber continued to visit world capitals, forge trade and security agreements, and advocate for global peace and development. He emphasized Kuwait's policy of balanced diplomacy, reaching out to both Western powers and Eastern Bloc countries. Under his leadership, Kuwait maintained good relations with China, the United States, the Soviet Union, and non-aligned states, even as tensions with Iraq intensified. By the end of the 1980s, Sheikh Jaber had guided Kuwait through political reform, regional violence, and a failed assassination attempt. His governance was increasingly characterized by strategic caution, quiet resilience, and a deepening commitment to national unity and international legitimacy. But the greatest test of his life, one that would define his legacy more than any other, was just around the corner. On the morning of August 2, 1990, Iraqi tanks crossed the border into Kuwait, setting in motion one of the most audacious acts of aggression in modern Middle Eastern history. Sheikh Jaber would be forced into exile, but even from afar, he would become the central figure in the liberation of his homeland. Part 8, Leader in Exile, the Iraqi Invasion and the Fight for Kuwait's Liberation, 1990-1991. The early morning of August 1990 marked one of the darkest and most defining moments in Kuwait's modern history. Without warning, the Iraqi army, under the command of President Saddam Hussein, launched a massive military invasion of Kuwait, quickly overwhelming its borders and occupying the capital. Within hours, government buildings were seized, strategic installations captured, and the Kuwaiti military outmatched by Iraqi forces numbering over 100,000 troops. What had begun as a tense diplomatic standoff over oil and debt suddenly erupted into a full-scale annexation of a sovereign state. In the face of this overwhelming aggression, Emir Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah refused to abandon his role or his nation. Though some advisors initially counseled him to stay and negotiate, Sheikh Jaber understood the existential nature of the threat. Staying would either legitimize the occupation or result in his capture, something he knew would be used as a tool of propaganda by Saddam's regime. At the urgent insistence of Sheikh Saad Al-Abdullah, then Crown Prince and Minister of Interior, Sheikh Jaber agreed to temporarily leave Kuwait, thereby preserving the continuity of legitimate leadership. He was taken from the besieged Dasman Palace to Saudi Arabia, where he re-established the Kuwaiti government in exile in the city of Taif. The escape was perilous and emotionally wrenching. Sheikh Jaber had always prided himself on being close to his people, and leaving them behind, even temporarily, was a decision he later described as the most painful of his life. But his resolve never wavered. In exile, he became the symbol of resistance, the embodiment of national dignity, and the architect of the global campaign to restore Kuwait's sovereignty. From Taif, Sheikh Jaber began a tireless diplomatic offensive. His first priority was to rally international support, framing the Iraqi invasion as not just a regional conflict, but a flagrant violation of international law, sovereignty, and the post-Wabuduponi order. He convened emergency meetings with the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council: the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, France, and China, along with numerous Arab, Asian, and Western governments. In every forum, he calmly but forcefully made Kuwait's case. One of the most significant moments came on August 10, 1990, when Sheikh Jaber participated in the Arab League summit in Cairo, seeking Arab consensus against Saddam's aggression. While not all member states condemned the invasion, some even tacitly supported Iraq, Sheikh Jaber's leadership helped galvanize a coalition of Arab nations that would later participate in military operations to liberate Kuwait. Sheikh Jaber's greatest diplomatic success, however, came through his close coordination with President George H.W. Bush of the United States and King Fahd of Saudi Arabia. Both leaders, convinced of the justice of Kuwait's cause and concerned about regional stability, pledged full support. With U.S. leadership, a UN-backed coalition of 35 nations began assembling in Saudi Arabia under Operation Desert Shield, later becoming Operation Desert Storm. Despite being far from home, Sheikh Jaber remained deeply engaged in his people's welfare. He maintained daily communication with Kuwaiti resistance networks, civil servants, and diplomats. He authorized the formation of the Kuwaiti Popular Conference, a national congress of political, religious, and intellectual leaders held in Jeddah in October 1990. There he made a solemn pledge to restore constitutional governance, rebuild the devastated infrastructure, and resurrect Kuwait's democratic life after liberation. In a particularly poignant moment during the Jeddah conference, he responded to questions about Palestinian support for Saddam Hussein by affirming that the Kuwaiti people would not retaliate against the Palestinian people, distinguishing between leadership positions and popular relations. He made similar statements regarding the Iraqi people, emphasizing that Saddam's regime, not the Iraqi nation, was responsible for the aggression. These responses reflected his humanity and long-term vision of reconciliation over revenge. Throughout the occupation, Sheikh Jaber became a unifying figure, not just for Kuwaitis, but for the international community seeking to uphold global norms. His image, soft-spoken, thoughtful, and dignified, stood in stark contrast to the bombast and aggression of Saddam Hussein. His speeches to the United Nations General Assembly, delivered with clarity and emotional restraint, helped solidify Kuwait's position as a victim of unlawful conquest and a legitimate cause for international action. Back in Kuwait, resistance continued in both organized and spontaneous forms. Civilians risked their lives to defy the occupation, hiding weapons, distributing leaflets, gathering intelligence, and refusing to cooperate with the puppet regime Iraq installed. Sheikh Jaber made it a priority to ensure that resistance fighters and civilians in occupied Kuwait received support where possible and recognition once the war ended. On January 17, 1991, following months of failed diplomacy and warnings, the U.S.-led coalition launched Operation Desert Storm to expel Iraqi forces. For weeks, Sheikh Jaber followed every development closely from his headquarters in Taif, coordinating with Kuwaiti military officers embedded with coalition forces and preparing for the immediate aftermath of liberation. Finally, on February 26, 1991, after 6 months and 24 days of occupation, Kuwait was liberated. The speed of the retreating Iraqi forces revealed the scale of the coalition's superiority, but also left behind scorched earth tactics, as Saddam's troops set fire to over 600 Kuwaiti oil wells, destroying vast environmental and economic assets. Nonetheless, Kuwait had been saved. Sheikh Jaber returned to his homeland on March 14, 1991, flying aboard a Kuwait Airways plane named Bubian, greeted by jubilant crowds and exhausted officials. As his feet touched the soil of a free Kuwait, he prostrated in prayer, offering thanks to God for the country's survival. It was a powerful image. The emir who had escaped to save Kuwait had returned to rebuild it. His speech upon his return was unforgettable. In it, he said, "Kuwait was not liberated by American, British, or Saudi armies, though they did all they could. It was liberated by the prayer of an old woman in Burkina Faso, or Benin, or Kenya, who lifted her hands to the heavens and was answered." The remark reflected his profound humility and belief in the power of prayer, unity, and justice, rather than might alone. It captured the emotional triumph of the moment and earned him the enduring title Amir al-Qulub, Emir of Hearts. Yet as jubilant as that moment was, Sheikh Jaber knew that the hard work had just begun. Kuwait was free, but it had been battered, traumatized, and divided. The task of reconstruction, material, institutional, and emotional, now lay ahead. Part 9, Rebuilder of a Nation, Post-War Recovery, Legacy, and Final Years, 1991-2006. The liberation of Kuwait in February 1991 was not the end of Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah's mission. It was in many ways the beginning of an even more demanding chapter. The war had left the country's infrastructure in ruins, its economy destabilized, its natural environment scorched by hundreds of burning oil wells, and its society deeply shaken. Yet amid the destruction, Sheikh Jaber stood resolute. His unwavering commitment to rebuild Kuwait, not merely in material terms but also in spirit and identity, would define the final years of his reign and solidify his place in history as the father of modern Kuwait. The first challenge was the reconstruction of the oil industry, the lifeblood of Kuwait's economy. With more than 600 oil wells set ablaze by retreating Iraqi forces, a monumental international effort was required to extinguish them. On November 6, 1991, Sheikh Jaber personally attended a public event commemorating the extinguishing of Bergen Well 118, the last of the burning wells, a symbolic moment signaling the resilience of Kuwait's national spirit and industrial backbone. This event brought together over 800 global and local figures, highlighting the global solidarity Kuwait had earned under his leadership. Alongside industrial recovery, Sheikh Jaber placed immense emphasis on the human dimension of post-war healing. He initiated numerous programs to support families of the martyrs, war-wounded, and missing persons. He ordered the creation of the Executive Office for Prisoner and Missing Affairs and established the Martyrs Bureau in August 1991 to honor those who sacrificed their lives for the nation's freedom. In speeches delivered at the United Nations and elsewhere, Sheikh Jaber passionately demanded the return of Kuwaiti prisoners of war from Iraq, keeping the issue alive on the global stage until every possible resolution was exhausted. Sheikh Jaber also understood that psychological and economic recovery had to go hand in hand. To ease the burden on war-torn citizens, he issued a historic decree to forgive all individual debts, a measure that reflected his profound empathy and moral commitment to his people. He believed that national recovery could not proceed if ordinary Kuwaitis remained shackled by financial hardship. In the realm of politics, Sheikh Jaber fulfilled his wartime promise by restoring parliamentary life. In October 1992, Kuwait held free parliamentary elections, reactivating its 1962 constitution. This was not merely a return to normalcy, it was a reaffirmation of Kuwait's unique democratic character in the Gulf. Even though opposition and Islamist forces gained ground in subsequent elections, Sheikh Jaber respected their mandates and maintained open institutional channels, proving himself as a constitutional monarch in the fullest sense. In terms of social reforms, he also made significant moves. In a landmark moment, Sheikh Jaber issued a royal decree on May 16, 1999, granting women the right to vote and run for office. Though the decree was initially rejected by the National Assembly, the foundation had been laid. Eventually, on May 16, 2005, Kuwaiti women were officially granted full political rights. Just weeks later, on June 12, 2005, Dr. Massouma al-Mubarak was appointed Kuwait's first female minister, serving as Minister of Planning and Administrative Development, a breakthrough made possible by Sheikh Jaber's long-standing advocacy. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, Sheikh Jaber continued to invest in cultural, scientific, and social initiatives. He launched the Future Generations Fund, an ambitious sovereign wealth initiative that diverted 10% of oil revenues annually into investments intended to secure Kuwait's economic future beyond the oil era. The fund proved vital not only during peacetime, but also during emergencies, such as the Gulf War, when its assets were used to finance the resistance and support refugees. He also founded the Kuwait Foundation for the Advancement of Sciences, KFAS, promoted the Kuwait Science Center, supported national museums, and contributed to the preservation of Kuwait's historical heritage, including the restoration of the historic Dixon House. His philanthropic interests extended abroad as well. At the United Nations in 1988, he called for debt relief for developing nations, which led to Kuwait writing off millions in debt owed by poorer countries, including 62 million dinars owed by Morocco. These actions cemented Kuwait's global reputation as a benevolent and ethical actor under Sheikh Jaber's guidance. In recognition of his humanitarian work, Sheikh Jaber received numerous honors. Among them, he was awarded an honorary doctorate by a Japanese university on October 14, 1965, and was named Charitable Personality of the Year in 1995 by the United Media and Marketing Foundation in the UK, following a massive poll involving 5 million Arab participants. Despite his enduring devotion to his nation, Sheikh Jaber's health began to decline in the early 2000s. In September 2001, he suffered a serious health episode and was taken to the United Kingdom for treatment, where he remained for 117 days, the longest absence from Kuwait since the Iraqi invasion. In August 2002, he underwent eye surgery, and in May 2005, he had a vascular operation on his leg in the United States. These ailments gradually took a toll on his ability to govern, though he continued to fulfill his duties as best he could. On the morning of January 15, 2006, Kuwait awoke to news that shook the nation. Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah had passed away following a cerebral hemorrhage. He was 79 years old, having served as Emir for nearly 3 decades, and as a statesman for over half a century. His passing triggered an outpouring of national grief and solemn international mourning. Flags were lowered to half-mast for 40 days, and a 3-day state of mourning was declared across government institutions. Condolences poured in from around the world. Nations such as Bahrain, Oman, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, Algeria, Pakistan, Yemen, India, and the Palestinian Authority all declared official mourning. The Arab League and UN General Assembly held minutes of silence in his honor. Dignitaries, including King Abdullah II of Jordan, President Hosni Mubarak of Egypt, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan of the UAE, and King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa of Bahrain attended the funeral, which took place at Sulaybikat Cemetery, accompanied by a sea of mourners and high-ranking officials. The nation he had rebuilt, defended, and led with wisdom was now united in bidding him farewell. In the days and weeks following his death, tributes, marches, and memorials were held throughout Kuwait and across the Arab world. A campaign titled 1 Million Letters, Poems, and Prayers was launched in his memory, alongside another titled Write It With Your Hand, begun by his daughter Sheikha Al-Kairawan. On January 18, 2006, Kuwait's Ministry of Education announced that the first school period of the new semester would be dedicated to studying the life and legacy of Sheikh Jaber. He was remembered not just as an emir, but as a father of the nation, a man of peace, humility, and vision. The creation of the Encyclopedia of Sheikh Jaber ensured that future generations would know his story, not merely as a record of events, but as a guide to public service and moral leadership. In the final analysis, Sheikh Jaber Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah's legacy transcended borders and politics. He was a unifier in times of crisis, a visionary in times of stability, and above all, a servant of his people. His reign was marked not only by prosperity and development, but by resilience, compassion, and a quiet dignity that left a lasting imprint on Kuwait and the world.